Thank you very much for that, and thank you very much for having me to present this paper. Now, I'm going to basically take much of what we've had today and try to look at it within a domestic context. And I will be looking at Nigeria, basically because I am from Nigeria. Now, I'm going to introduce the context, which is Nigeria, to you. And of course, I know that you must have heard about Nigeria for one reason or another, maybe about the corruption, about the religious conflicts, and maybe about football in the past. Yeah, but the country is more than that. The country is located in West Africa. It has a huge population of about 140 million people. And almost half of the population will consider themselves to be Muslims, while about another half, about 48.5%, will consider themselves Christians. And then you have a minority of about 1.5% or 1.4% that follows other religion. In the northern part of the country, the Muslims, most of the people in the north will be Muslims, but a very small percentage, while in the south, most of the people in the south will be Christians. And of course, in the news in the past few months, or say a year now, the religious tension in the country between, especially between, Muslims and Christians, has increased to some extent, and that will probably be part of what I'm going to mention in this talk, okay, and how it interacts with the topic, my topic today. The topic again is Islamic banking. So I'll be focusing on banking specifically and what is happening as regards Islamic banking in Nigeria. Now, I'll start by looking at the history of conventional banking in Nigeria. Like most other things in Nigeria, the history of the banking system is linked with the colonial history of the country itself. As you may well be aware, the country was under the British rule for quite a long time until 1960, when it gained independence. And so when you look at most of the banks that started operating in Nigeria in the early days, there will be banks that have their origin in England, and I've given some of the examples on the board, on my slide. I mean, the first bank in Nigeria is the Bank of British West Africa, which later became Standard Bank and eventually First Bank of Nigeria. And most of these banks are operating under different names at the moment back home in Nigeria. It was not until 1914 that you have local banks being established in the country. As at this time, there were no local laws to guide how banks were established, but basically they get some kind of permit from the colonial authorities, and these banks were established. And interestingly, in the early 60s, a bank called the Muslim Bank of West Africa was established in Nigeria. But as time goes on, in 1968, the license of that bank was revoked in 1968, okay? And by 1968, what happened in the country was that the country got independence in 1960. So we have, from 1960, local administration, that is people within Nigeria governing themselves. And the government felt in 1968 that they don't want religious banks. So they revoked the license of the Muslim Bank of West Africa and passed the Banking Act of 1969 the following year. And the Banking Act of 1969 allowed for the establishment of conventional banks alone. So basically, without saying it expressly, the Nigerian government basically outlawed, in a way, Islamic banking in 1969, okay? And that was the position until 1991, when a new law was put into place by the government in power then, the military government. And that was the Banks and Other Financial Institutions Act of 1991. And Section 61 of that act basically allowed for the establishment of profit and loss sharing banking. You know, it did not say Sharia banking, but that is what Section 61 says, that profit and loss sharing banking can be established within Nigeria. And this was widely known to mean that Islamic banking can be established again in Nigeria. And interestingly, Section 21, subsection 1, removes one of the impediments under the 1969 Act, and that is basically that a bank will have to display its interest rates. And it now says, this section says that the profit and loss sharing banks, they do not have to display any interest. So, similarly, the 1991 Act allows again for the possibility of establishing an Islamic bank within Nigeria. And since, around that period, in 1992, 2 licenses were actually issued for the purposes of transacting Islamic banking. One was issued to a bank that was called Abib Bank. Okay? And the bank offered for some time non-interest banking window for a while. But that did not, the bank changed its name later on and changed its operating system and removed the Islamic banking window from its operations. And at the moment, there's also an attempt to establish a full-fledged Islamic bank called Jais Bank PLC. But again, there's a problem with this bank at the moment, because when the license was issued initially in 2003, the capital requirement for the bank was very low. But in recent times, mainly because of problems that the country have had with banks over the years, because almost in every decade, we've had like bank failures and collapse. So because of that, they increased the requirement, the capital requirement for the bank. And so because of that, the backers of the bank have been struggling to raise the necessary capital to run this new Islamic bank. Okay, now, in order to move the process forward, the Central Bank of Nigeria, which is the supervisory authority for banks in Nigeria, recently, and that was in 2010, issued a new guideline for Islamic banking in Nigeria. Okay, but that guideline that was issued, I would say, was probably, was done in haste, and basically, I will call it a very flawed approach. Because in the first place, the guideline says that it is going to, it was made to provide guidance for the establishment of non-interest financial institutions in Nigeria. Then it went on to define non-interest financial institutions as Islamic/Sharia banking. Okay? Now, and then it went on to say that all non-interest banking products must be Sharia compliant. And also, the guideline provides that all non-interest financial institutions must have a Sharia advisory committee. And this is problematic in the context of Nigeria. In the first place, it was really a misinterpretation of Section 61 of the 1991 Act that allows for profit and loss sharing banking, because basically what that provision says is that if you can put together a kind of institution that will operate on a profit and loss basis, then you can establish in Nigeria under the Banking Act. But there was no direct link with Sharia banking or Islamic banking. But what the Central Bank of Nigeria tried to do at that time was basically to say that Section 61 is about Islamic banking, and that is the end of the story. So if you want to establish a profit and loss banking system, it must be Islamic. Now, of course, I told you earlier that this is a country that is almost half and half divided between Muslims and Christians. Of course, that raised a lot of concerns, and it actually create more problems than it should happen in the first place. Okay, because then the Christians felt a little bit agitated that, look, it's as if it was an attempt to impose the Sharia banking system on the country. And again, it's raised a constitutional problem, because under the Nigerian constitution, you cannot discriminate on the basis of religion. Now, if you say that all profit and loss sharing banks should be Islamic banking, then if some other groups, maybe Christians, maybe the traditional religious people want to establish their banks, then they will not be able to do so. Then it will become like as if they have been discriminated against. And so because of that, there was a lot of opposition to that initial attempt in 1961 to bring some kind of push or to move the establishment of Islamic banking system within the country forward. But recently, in 2011, the CBN has revised that guideline. And this, I think, is a much better approach, which will facilitate the establishment of the Islamic banking system in Nigeria. Okay? And now the new guideline recognizes that other groups can, or anybody within the country can establish a profit and loss sharing banking system or a non-interest financial institution within the country. And it doesn't have to be Sharia compliant. Okay? So it recognizes that plurality that you can establish a different type of profit and loss sharing institutions. Okay? And expressly it prohibits discrimination, basically reiterating what was stated in the Nigerian constitution on faith, any discrimination based on faith or ethnicity or any other ground. And the last point, which is also important, is that it also allowed conventional banks within the country to open Islamic banking window if they want to. So basically opening up the Islamic banking system to different or the non-interest financial banking system to different groups within the country. Okay, and I think this is a much better approach. And now, I mean, there's still opposition to it, but I think the opposition was caused because of the approach that the Central Bank of Nigeria took earlier when it introduced the initial guideline in 2010. Okay, now under the guideline, there are certain kind of transactions that are prohibited, and I'm sure you're aware of these type of transactions. They have been talked about today, and you have a list of what is contained in the guideline on the slide there. And basically, the guideline also empowers the Central Bank of Nigeria to, from time to time, add to this list or to take away from the list. Okay, it's very wide. You can see that it's quite. I mean, it contains most of the things that most Muslims will find objectionable. So, but like I said, this can be added to or taken from by the CBN. Okay, now what is the relevance of the Islamic banking system within the country? Now, you see, like I said in Nigeria, that in Nigeria, because of the religious tension, you know, there's views against and views supporting this move. I must say personally that I do not see a problem with the establishment of Islamic banking system in Nigeria. And I must say also that I'm a Christian and I'm from the southern part of the country. Okay? But the thing is that, you know, establishing a new system of banking in the country, it's, I mean, it's just increasing opportunities of what is available to consumers, basically. Because if some institution can't give loans to people without taking interest, what is the problem with that? So I think, you know, it's a good idea that one should not just walk away from because of faith. And again, you look at the country, I said before, it has a large Muslim population. And again, on the issue of social responsibility, I mean, we know the conventional banking system today is much against the ordinary or the common person on the road, basically. Because, I mean, dealing with them is quite challenging in a way. I mean, they're not very beneficial, especially in third world countries. I mean, it's very, very difficult for people without land, without collateral to get any type of loan from the conventional banking system. And I think there's a possibility that the Islamic system may be able to provide this type of loan, especially microfinance loan that you're going to hear about later on in this, the last session. And apart from that, it can also complement conventional banking by putting out there more products that people can access. And then it also opens up, especially within Nigeria, the possibility of having other type of banking system. Because you see, the thing in Nigeria is this: when some religious group in the country started establishing private universities, then other religious groups that were not thinking about it before, they jumped into it and they were establishing their own to take in students. And I think it's a good idea, because then more people are having the opportunity to go to university. Now, if you take that to banking too, if you have Islamic banks, I'm sure some of the Christians will say, okay, we must establish Christian banks too, something like that. And then you open up your more opportunities, more avenues for people to get financial products. So there are quite a lot of advantages that may come with the introduction of the system within the Nigerian context. What are the key challenges? I said it earlier, the perception of non-Muslims is a big problem because of the way it was introduced initially. I mean, if the people responsible, especially the Central Bank of Nigeria, had been more careful, I don't think there should be a problem with it. They have gone about it in a way that made other religious groups suspicious. Then the issue of constitutional matter, but I don't think this is a problem at all, as long as it is not discriminatory. And that has been removed by the 2011 guideline. Then the issue of being against the Constitution should not arise at all. And then, I mean, the third point is the role of the Central Bank of Nigeria itself. Like I said earlier, every decade we've had bank failures in Nigeria where people lose their deposit in banks. Now, if the CBN cannot adequately supervise conventional banks, how are they going to cope with supervising other type of banking system? That's a big problem that I don't have an answer to. And thirdly, there's no legal framework for it at the moment. All we have is the guideline, and I think they have to go beyond guidelines. You need to have like a comprehensive legal framework for Islamic banking system or profit and loss banking system within Nigeria. And then another point is in respect of these Sharia governance institutions. I mean, you need people, Sharia scholars, people that know very much, people that have advanced knowledge of what is what is Islamic or what is Sharia compliant or not, to govern the kind of products that the banks will be involved with. At the moment in Nigeria, I'm not sure that we have that. Actually, we have quite a few different schools of Islamic scholars within the country, depending on where you live. Okay, and this is a problem because some says this is Sharia compliance, others says no, and then you don't have a consensus, and that would be problematic when you have a bank that is operating across the country. And of course, the next one is in relation to capital. I've mentioned the problem that Jais International Bank in Nigeria is having at the moment. It's trying to raise the required capital base, but up to now they've not been able to do that. And the last point is in respect of profitability. You mentioned the Islamic Bank of Britain earlier. I mean, that bank for the past 5 years has been running at a loss. And recently, in Dubai, the authorities in Dubai had to step in to buy quite a substantial part of the shares of the company in order to stabilize it. Okay, so this is a problem. I mean, if you want to, there's no problem with operating a system, a new system of banking, but you must find a way to make it profitable. Okay, the alternative, and I think this is what this should be about actually, is to operate these banks as charities. If you do that, if you're focusing on, say, we're solving social problems, and basically that means you need people to invest, people that will basically act as, philanthropists, basically give their money for free to these banks to operate with. Then otherwise, there's going to be a problem of making them profitable. The capital, the subscriber of, the Islamic Bank of Britain has been operating for about 5 years. It has only 50,000 customers or thereabout. Now you compare to most banks in Britain, that is very, very small. Okay, how are you going to make it more attractive to people? That's a big problem. And I think even in Nigeria, these people that are looking to establish Islamic Bank must look for ways to make it profitable. Otherwise, you just have to run it as a charity if you want it to succeed. Okay, that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for listening.